I'm excited to welcome today's podcast guest, Mr. Matt Solomon. Matt is a great dude and a recognizable dude. All of us know him. He's a man about town, a man about the community, and he's been a part of some amazing technology vendors. He's figured out how to build a community, how to scale, knowing when to outsource versus insource, and achieve the level of success that so many vendors don't. If you're a vendor or even just a technology business owner and you want to learn how to leverage third-party resources to scale your growth, this is the podcast for you. I'm excited to welcome Matt Solomon to the GROW Limitless podcast. One of those guys that is a face you can't forget. He's always out and about in the community, always someone who's to me exudes positivity and just fun to be around. He's also a smart dude that can share a lot of lessons that he's learned in his journey through 3 different vendors in the MSP community. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. You've been a big part of the journey over the last couple, I think 8 years that I've been in the channel. We've now known each other, and I don't know if a face that's recognizable is a good thing or a bad thing, but no, I'm excited to be here and talk through some of the journey.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. Before we get started on those the three vendors in the community you've been working on, what's your story back before that, man? Tell me about your educational background. What did you do before you entered into the MSP channel?
Yeah. Going back to college, I went to Towson University up near Baltimore, Maryland, and my focus was, marketing was really my degree. So it's always been in the back of my head, marketing, business development. Started my career at an accounting firm, which wasn't super exciting, but, you kind of early lessons and, I was able to make my mark at that accounting firm, and then actually made a pretty wild decision at the time, that felt wild at the time, which was to move up to New York City. I went and lived with my sister, and I moved up there with no job. And I walked into Times Square in the first 24 hours and got a job waiting tables at Bubba Gump Shrimp House in Times Square. And it was a 6-month little journey there, like where I was at, in the middle of Times Square. But it was like, you learned selling lessons, just the power of just suggestion, just suggesting, would you like an appetizer? Particularly if somebody was on a date, it prompted the two of them to go back and forth, and generally speaking, they would end up ordering an appetizer, which obviously increased the bill, which increases your tip. And then, learning what not to suggest, which was I didn't want to suggest dessert or coffee at the end of a meal because I didn't want them, it was turn and burn. So I learned some early lessons there, and then ended up for about 10 years at a copyright and licensing publishing company, which now seems weird to talk about because there's hardly any magazines and newspapers, hard magazines and newspapers these days. But that was focused on the legal industry, and then fell into this company called Winvale, which is where I met my current co-founder, Kevin Lancaster at. It was his business, and it was selling with businesses doing business with the government, essentially, so GSA schedules. So that's started what introduced me to Kevin, who is ultimately the serial entrepreneur, and I joke that I'm the guy that's smart enough to just keep tagging along. So.
Hey, listen, I think he would say that he would not have been as successful without you. So you're more of like a Batman and Robin tag team kind of thing. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, Kevin's a great guy. I love being around him as well. So talk about that journey. What was the first step in that journey with you and Kevin? Yeah,
so after about 8 months of focusing on the government stuff, he came to me with this idea around dark web monitoring. And at the time, you have to really go back. This is about 2015. So it wasn't as common of a thing that people are talking about. And he told me about it. I was like, I don't know what this is, but it sounds infinitely more exciting than GSA schedules. So I took a chance, and I knew at the time it was going to take a while. And so when I say I sold my car, I lived in downtown Washington, D.C. It wasn't a massive thing I did, but, I cut all my costs down to kind of, know that we were getting into the startup thing. And we were actually, interestingly enough, too early to market because at the time when we were talking about credentials being exposed on the dark web and we were selling to enterprise, the LinkedIn breach hadn't happened. You know, I know it's crazy to talk about MySpace. MySpace breach hadn't happened yet, and so it wasn't like a common thing that people were aware of. And so we were kind of beating our heads against the wall for about 8 months in the enterprise, even though we did sign some really interesting customers and some of the largest law firms in the world, some of the largest sports organizations. It wasn't until those breaches occurred, and particularly the GSA breach, like the government breach, or OPM breach. And then it started becoming part of the forefront. But we were basically not priced correctly for the enterprise based on how long the sales cycle was taking. And then, I mean, I can distinctly remember having a conversation with Kevin about this MSP concept. And I didn't know much. He knew more about the MSPs than I did, but we floated the idea of like, let's just try this last thing. And if it doesn't work, then we're honestly probably having to shut it down. And so we went from like having to potentially shut it down to almost overnight, one article like changed everything. Then then we just started hitting the circuit all of a sudden and getting introduced to folks like you. And we had a blue ocean product. You know, it was dark web monitoring. We were the first to introduce it in 2017. Literally, Terry, I went from like those 8 months of the enterprise where we were struggling, I could barely get out of bed. I was like, it was so miserable during that time of like, we just weren't having the success that we thought we were going to have. So like to have that and then switch over to like literally running to work almost like with excitement, because at the time I was closing like 70% of my demos. I mean, it was like unheard. I knew I was smart enough and had enough years behind me to realize I was like, this is a once in a lifetime thing and I'm going to take full advantage of it. And I mean, there's a million stories that we can jump into, but that was kind of we were the right people at the right time with the right product. MSPs were struggling to talk about security, and our tool allowed them to talk about it. And, you know, Marketopia was a part of that journey, and I'm happy to talk about that as well.
Interesting. So what, I guess, how did that article come about? It seems like that's like a pivot point right there, right? Yeah. So how did that article come about? Is that something he arranged through his relationships? Did you just get lucky? Did you pay for it?
No. So, well, that's interesting. We didn't pay for it, but I definitely thought the reason they ran the article was a way to get us to sponsor potentially. So I had just started doing research, you know, just with like MSP stuff, and I don't even know I can't even think of the publication now because I don't even think it exists. But this guy Alden Brown was his name, and I know he's been in the space for a while. And we basically just got on a call with him and we showed him what we were doing, and he was like, "This is fascinating," and he's like, "I want to write an article about it." And so that's when I thought, like, okay, he's doing this because he wants us to sponsor, or maybe he just found it interesting. I don't know. I still, to this day, don't know the answer. But regardless, he thought it was interesting, ran an article, and we went from 0 inbound leads to 20 MSPs calling us within a couple weeks from that article. And we got introduced, to some various peer groups. But it was a couple individual MSPs who basically helped us in those early days where they were like, your pricing does not work for us. And really outlined and shaped what our, packages would look like. And honestly, they kind of remained our packages through acquisition. We kept to those core, I guess, principles that we were told in the very beginning. But yeah, that article ran, and then we got introduced to the MSP event circuit, which is a huge animal, obviously. And when we were at events, we were very fortunate. It's a very expensive industry in terms of events and spending, money to be on stage. But we were fortunate enough that we were closing enough deals at events to pay for the speaking. It was unbelievable. It's hard for me to explain it to people, but I could literally have gotten off stage, and this isn't just me. It's just the product, it was the messaging, it's everything, where I could have thrown physical signed, copies of our contract, and people were signing it. That's what it felt like when we got back off of stage, because it was so new to everybody. I mean, we were signing 20, 30, and then we had a record of 87 deals we closed at one event. So it was just nothing like it. It was wild.
What a cool experience, like lightning in a bottle.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Well, Matt, I know, to be honest with you, knowing you and working with you through that journey, you were certainly a big part of that. And so you should be proud of that. I know that it helps to be in the right place at the right time with the right product. And Kevin's a good dude and knows what he's doing. I'm not, diminishing all of those things, but you played a big role in that. You're a personality. People kind of trust you and they like you and they want to be around you. When you speak, they listen just naturally. So, you get a big chunk of that credit too, man. Don't sell yourself short. Very cool, man. What was it? 87 in one event?
Yeah, 87 in one event, and because I know there's some vendors have some big numbers out there, but it's usually when there's like a free trial involved. Ours was straight up. I mean, we booked over $330,000, and we're talking about an average of we were like 4,100 average ARR, so it was nuts. But yeah, I mean, yeah, as you mentioned, yeah, I mean, I played a big part of it. Obviously, we built an awesome BD team with Amelia, Jamie, and Natasha. But we did get to a point where we were like, it was great we were closing deals at events, but we had to match it with inbound leads, that weren't just at events. It's to put all of the money on just events is really tough, and it's almost impossible these days, especially with the cost. And that's where our relationship, professionally ended up. We had met many times on the road, but we were like, we need somebody actually dialing. Like, we cannot just depend on events, and that's where Marketopia played a big part of getting us to that next level. And it was really fun being able to close deals at events while your team, really that one individual particularly, was calling and booking demos for the sales team back home, and so we're just closing business everywhere all of a sudden, and yeah. That particular individual was really an extension of our team, and it was like, she was great, she's fantastic, and I'm pretty sure, at least the last time I checked, she's moved up quite a bit in your company. So
yep.
Yeah,
she's awesome, and I'm really glad that you treated her that way, because I think part of, and this going back to you treated her like she was an extension of your team. You showed appreciation. You I guess if she had a down day or a down week or even a down month, you didn't like chastise her like she's some sort of robot that doesn't have emotions. You treat her like a real human being, man, and that led to a lot of dedication, a lot of loyalty, a lot of hard work, going above and beyond. And I think that ties into just what it takes to be successful. You said something there that I really want to key back on, because I think it's a lesson that a lot of vendors don't learn quick enough, and that is, events are wonderful when they're there, but they're not evenly distributed throughout the year, and the cost of them is getting absolutely out of control. In my mind, it's like the only way you can really afford to go is if you're a SaaS private equity VC funded company, because you might have a good ROI in the long term, but the upfront is astoundingly high and seemingly getting higher and higher as all the events sort of try to one up each other on the show part. So talk to me about that. So you said, hey, listen, we got this event thing going. It's part of our plan. It's necessary. We got to get out in the community, shake hands, kiss babies. I get that part. But now you said, okay, let's get a more of a systematic outbound effort. How did that tie in to consistency of revenue, consistency of leads, less seasonality with growth, and then just stability for the organization? Kind of walk me through that.
Yeah, I mean, it was just evident to us. Again, Eddie Agent's so unique in the sense of like the velocity we had, but we just couldn't consistently, week to week hit the numbers we were looking to hit because of an event. Like, yeah, you get this massive spike. Again, we were fortunate that we were one of those vendors who could close deals at an event, but we were looking for real scale, and we just could not do that with just events. Even though there's a lot of events, there's only so many people that you can send to them. There's only so much money you can spend, and so really for the consistency, that's why we needed somebody making the calls, is so that our sales team wasn't just depending on the BD team coming back with all these demos. We needed. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I feel like it was 25, 30 demos we were getting booked a week at that time. And so we just absolutely needed that for consistency and being able to report out like the future earnings, because it was just, you didn't want to have these massive up and down valleys, hills and valleys. And I mean, it played a huge part. I mean, and the other piece of it is most, unless you're a conglomerate vendor, like if you're not calling on all these leads that you're spending all this money for to be at events, sometimes you get lead lists and sometimes you don't, but they're just sitting in your CRM. I mean, the amount of vendors I've worked with, in our channel program journey where we've done, joint marketing things where we give them a list of 2,000 MSPs and it just sits.
Yeah.
And it's, and it's just like, you've got to be in front of me. You probably know better than me than how many marketing touches these, they need in order to close the business. It's probably in the 20s at this point. So yeah, it's just, that's what we needed. We needed people ready and firing in that moment. It's like, we're on the road, here are the leads, fire away, and not, time kills everything. Time kills all deals.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. And it is a problem. I think one of the things that I've seen in the I guess two things I've seen with vendors in terms of mistakes in this category. One is that they try to turn salespeople into BDRs. And it's like, they're not going to do it. 29 touch points to get a deal is a metric that our team tosses around. And the average salesperson is not going to make 29 outbound calls to get a deal. They might make 2, but they're definitely not going to make 29. So a lot of leads don't get one. And the other thing that I've noticed, and I'm curious on your thoughts on this in hindsight, internal versus external. Is it easy to create an outbound BDR function that maintains the KPIs and performance metrics that you would expect? Or is that something that really benefits from third-party expertise and sort of like a specialty environment dedicated to that?
Yeah, so I think, let's talk about the first point. And it's funny because I just was reading a gentleman's post on LinkedIn where it was talking about, like, he was trying to turn his A-team salespeople into like mentors to some of the juniors, and it killed everybody's productivity, right? Mm-hmm. So like trying to put people in positions that isn't their main function or their strength, I think is a detriment to them. And that's why, you don't see a lot of successful like salespeople who are then being asked to make SDR type of calls. You're just really hurting your overall productivity. You want your salespeople doing demos, period. Every second they're spending making a cold call, to me, is a complete waste of time, personally. And the second part, actually, what is the second part? What was the second part of the question? Sorry.
So basically the second part was, do you find that it's easy to create an internal function, or is outsourcing to a specialty company, specialty environment better?
I mean, for us, it was better to outsource it towards Marketopia. I think the biggest challenge we had, and I mean, I know I'm not alone, is just even the interview process of SDRs. It's a tough job, and you get a wide range of people who are willing to do that job, and the time suck on us, from an executive level, on just finding people and doing the interviews, and then hiring people and then having them flame out a week later and things like that. It ended up being, for us, just a complete waste. And it was not productive for us. And over my 10 years now in this space, I think we've found that the SDR hiring to be the most challenging hiring, period. And I'm sure you have reasons that you can probably explain of why that is. But for us, it's always been like that.
Yeah. And this is something that I find interesting. There's some people in the channel that really, really, really are respected, and it's because they came from like a big vendor, like a massively successful vendor where they created these massive sales teams, and they really push every little tiny vendor, every medium vendor, every vendor to have everything be internal, and they struggle mightily, especially when they're small. And I've thought a lot about this because I've been on different chats with this person and those other people, just listening to the dynamic of the struggle combined with the unwavering like dictation that this is the way to get it done. And I just, sometimes when you get really big and you're really successful, if you forget about how things are when you're at 1 and 2 and 5 people, and you start thinking, oh, well, I had this factory where I could develop people quickly and have them successful as BDRs, and they don't sit back sometimes to think, okay, well, I had a really senior level executive leading it. I had mid managers that were managing people, and then I had team leads that have been there for years, teaching the new people that came aboard. So I spent a decade making a factory, and the reality is a lot of the vendors out there don't have time. They don't have a decade to spend to make the factory. They're expected to become the next ID agent and snap their fingers and see it productive. And one of the reasons that I see that is that they're not in an environment conducive to it. If you have a BDR sitting next to a salesperson, that salesperson is not a fan of the BDR. They annoy them, they distract them, whatever. And what ends up happening is the BDR's productivity drops because they're trying to be quiet or they're trying to not offend. And you want to, if you're in a hard job, like Wolf of Wall Street kind of thing, they weren't sitting next to the accounting department. They were in a room that was conducive to the high energy, thump, thump, thump music, sort of an upbeat environment to keep you motivated, because it's not easy to make the 100th call of the day, or whatever, the 50th call of the day. So yeah, I was curious on your thought on that, because it just feels like, I guess people tend to forget just because you can doesn't mean you should. And just because it's cheaper in the short term doesn't mean it's a better ROI in the long term, because ultimately, and you're in SaaS and in the channel, success comes from revenue, not cost reduction. It's about generating the more leads, more sales, eventually yields better results.
Yeah. Well, and there's some calculators out there that we started using, where you basically put, the salaries of the people that are in a meeting, and you start realizing, like, what if we just cut 15 minutes out of this meeting, how much money we save as an organization from just like, that's just a baseline of like, my time's worth this. And that's what I think, these smaller vendors need to think about, at an executive level, is like, all right, if I have to interview 25, SDR applications, how much of that time, how much is that time actually worth? And to your point, you start doing the numbers, and it's not cheaper. It's not cheaper even, and then the other piece, I think, with so many people obviously in, doing remote, businesses now, I do think there's like, you all are in an office down there in Florida. Like, you have your team. Yeah, they might be, the SDRs might be separate from some of the others, but they're around that energy. Whereas like now you're hiring an SDR and it's a remote SDR and they don't have anybody there. And look, you might find a gem sometimes, but just historically speaking, yeah, it's a incredibly volatile position. Yeah. And I think without being around other people, I think most SDRs would really struggle.
Yeah, it's not easy. Frankly, it wasn't even in our business model when we launched. We were a digital agency, and we wanted to outsource to the Philippines for calling and more of a pass-through than any kind of revenue generator, profit generator. But they failed miserably. It was terrible. So we honored all the offshore contracts and brought it onshore, and that gave birth to what now is the most robust part of the company by far, with probably 60-70% of revenue there, and then a majority of people. But it works, and that's one of the things that keeps people coming back and keeps people doing it, even when they say, "Oh my God, I can save $1,000 by bringing in internal." End up coming back 6 months later, going, "Oh shoot, the turnover was hard." And it's like, yeah, it takes a village. It takes recruiters and trainers and HR people and managers and a physical environment. And all these people ask what your secret sauce is. I'm like, it's just built. Like, I don't know how to describe it. It's all the little things that add up to some big thing. One of my favorite contests is when we say, "Okay, well, you're skeptical. I get it. Why don't we do a competition? Your team versus mine. 2-on-2. Let's see what happens." And we end up 50% more production. So you're like, yeah, you might be spending whatever 10% more than you would, but you're getting 50% more results. It obviously the ROI is in that favor.
Nah, I love a bake-off competition. That's cool. I didn't know you guys have ever done that.
Yeah, I love it. We've never lost, so that
that's good.
If you can get someone to do that. Normally when you say that, they're like, "Okay, you're probably right. It's harder than Everything about sales is harder than it looks. It's not easy to find a Matt Solomon to get on your team and to be the face of the organization, because Kevin's a great dude, but he's not the front guy as much as you are, right? And you're that personality that people gravitate to, and they're on this video right now going, "What is BetterTracker?" And I can't wait to get to what you're doing these days. But, okay, so ID Agent's killing it. You've got events going that are producing pops. You're taking all those leads, giving it to your BDR team, and they're turning it into you said 20 to 30 leads a month or a week. I'm sorry. For your sales team, which obviously is going to have a fairly consistent close percentage. So you can literally start planning your revenue growth week after week, month after month, quarter after quarter.
That's exactly right. And so it definitely put us in a position, which ultimately we did get acquired. So we scaled up to 2,000 MSPs in just about 2 years. But yeah, I mean, having that consistency was huge, yeah. So
2,000 MSPs in 2 years. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, at the peak, it's always hard. Some of these numbers are, out of my head at this point. But I mean, at the peak, we were signing over 100 MSPs per month. Yeah, I mean, we had to, obviously. So it was like, yeah, it was insane. It was
awesome.
Yeah, I guess that's it. That's why I was running to work every day.
Yeah, I don't blame you. That sounds fun. We've grown really quickly, but I certainly have never sold 100 MSPs in a month. That's awesome. Now, I gotta ask, man, if your revenue's like this, you're killing it. Why sell? Did Kevin need a new boat? Did you need a fresh new haircut? I mean, what's the reason you sold out when you're driving a rocket ship?
So I think it's important to note, Kevin was the owner. I was not an owner of ID Agents. I was the first employee. I definitely had juice in the game, but I did not have any decision-making power as far as that. I mean, I remember him having a discussion with me about like whether we should or shouldn't, and it was tough because you're right, we were scaling so fast, but we'd hit that kind of that mark of like 5 million in revenue, reoccurring revenue, which is a pretty big number. That gets obviously a lot of attraction from people, and I think what we saw was how quickly it was about to get commoditized. So despite being the first and only dark web monitoring company for about 1.5 years, and look, we took full advantage of it. You had other companies coming into the space like Breach Secure Now, and then other ones that were starting to come in, and it felt like the writing was on the wall that eventually this was going to become a commoditized product, and it was going to be incredibly hard to differentiate our tool versus other tools. We did it through the people and the sales enablement materials. Like, we set ourselves apart for a long time with that. But I think the writing was on the wall, and it proved out. If you look at right now the top products on a cybersecurity stack, dark web monitoring is number 7. It's like from no MSPs in 2017 using it to number 7 on the stack, essentially. So that's where I think we can go back and look at it and be like, yeah, we made the right decision, or he made the right decision.
Well, I'm going to push back on that. One thing that I always wondered is, to me, it was obvious. I could feel that energy. I could see that success. It wasn't hard to know that you guys were firing on all cylinders, and it was an honor to ride that ride with you. But I always wondered why Kevin didn't double down, triple down, quadruple down. Why not, 5x your lead gen, 5x your sales team? Like, why not turn that hockey stick into this? Because it felt like an insatiable demand, and it was a once-in-a-lifetime thing, and I'm just kind of wondering why, in hindsight, I'm even curious what you think he would do if he could do it all over again. But why, I felt like you guys grew quickly, but you could have grown 5 times as fast. Is it never that like that, or do you think you were, was the constraint people and leads that you can change whenever you want, or?
It's a good question. I've never thought about like if we hired a bunch of if we actually, like you said, even put more money into our partnership with you all and had 5 more SDRs. Yeah, it's hard to say. I still go back to the competitive element where we had just, all of a sudden everybody was offering it. Even, like LionGuard offers a million things, but then they had dark web monitoring as part of it. And it started getting almost just thrown in as a part of a package. So to me, it was a race to the bottom from a price point perspective. So I'm positive that played a major part. But yeah, you probably have to have a podcast part 2 where Kevin answers that question.
I might.
I think it's one of those things. I think everybody did well when it was sold, so I don't think there's that much regret in the terms of the timing of it. And it took us, I think, which is life, onto this journey. And so if we didn't do that, I don't know where we would be today. Like, we perhaps wouldn't have had built Channel Program and BetterTracker. So it's something I guess I don't really harp or spend too much time on, because at the time it felt like the right timing, and it's taken us on this path. So and I love what I do still, and I'm happy to be on the path and happy to do it with him again.
Yeah, well, and this time you probably have a little more skin in the game, so you probably have a little more upside potential. To me, that would be the one catch for you. Like, well, actually, I worked as hard as I wanted to work.
Yeah.
I see some vendors take two different approaches here. You're like, wow, this is working great, thank you. And then other people go, this is working great. Can you double, triple, quadruple, quintuple? And we'll get clients like ID Agent who go from 1 to 5 to 10 to 20. Mm-hmm. And they turn their 20 leads a week into 200 leads a week. And it felt like you could have done that. And I was just always wondered, and I didn't know there was obviously a reason, I'm sure, but I was just kind of curious about it. Very cool. Very cool. All right. So you get to the point, you're driving this rocket ship, you sell ID Agent, windfall, everyone's cheering, you sold. Tell me about that transaction. Who'd you sell to? Did you go with them? Walk me through kind of that next phase.
Yeah, so we got acquired by Kaseya, which, if it's an MSP listening, we'll certainly know who that is. I mean, they're one of the largest conglomerates in this space. So we were kind of on that ride of when they were doing a lot of major acquisitions, particularly around, like, I guess, the best of breed, right? Like, they looked at, like, IT Glue and the followings that those tools had. I wasn't in on every conversation, but I believe strongly, we were acquired, one, because of our velocity, but then two, we had a product that allowed it was an easy stepping stone into selling multiple products. Like, get your foot in the door with ID Agent and sell the rest of the 29 products that Kaseya had. So I think we fit perfectly with that, and we had raving fans. And so I think that was obviously part of their strategy, and they did the same with, IT Glue and Rapid Fire Tools, and obviously a series of other ones. So we both spent, I mean, not the exact amount of time, but we were both there about 2.5 years at Kaseya, but it was during, obviously, an incredibly interesting time in the world, which was the pandemic time. And so, for myself, I had to, like, really reinvent what I was doing, because my entire life was on the road with ID Agent. So I just tried to find ways to pivot and stand out in the crowd. And, one of those actually was working with your wife on an event where we called it, it's funny enough, called Pivot to Grow. Mm-hmm. And we were just throwing things at the wall at that time. And, we did you would never do this now because no one would ever pay attention for a week, but I think we did like 4 straight days of in a virtual conference. And, we had somewhere between 700 and 1,000 people attend, various days over that 4 days. And then I started interviewing, like, pretty big celebrities. I got to interview Magic Johnson, Wayne Gretzky, and I just brought the vendors together, and I was like, look, we got it. There's too many webinars. It's all going to be the same. I'm not trying to make money off you. Let's just cover the cost, and we do shared marketing activities. So we're just really trying to find creative ways, and I think we did as well as we could during those COVID times. And then, Kevin and I both went our separate ways from Kaseya, and sort of were doing the same thing in a different capacity, which was consulting with vendors. I was literally doing my own thing, and Kevin was doing it from more of the approach of, like, the CEO stuff, and I was doing it more from, like, the boots on the ground, like strategies of what works at events. And and then we were, like, talking, and we were like, well, we're sort of talking to the same vendors in different ways. Like, couldn't we come together? And how it all, like, birthed into Channel Program, I guess, is a good question. Again, at the time, this is a reminder for the audience, like, events were not in full swing yet. And so what we were using big terms, like, we were going to democratize the channel. So we were looking at it as, like, anti-establishment kind of messaging of, like, we're tired of this event cost. It's too much for an emerging vendor. And we're hearing from the same vendors over and over again, which means the MSP experience sucks also, because they're just hearing the same stuff at every event. And so when we launched Channel Program, and we're a long way from where we were, it was basically a virtual platform that would give equal like main stage time to any vendor. Everybody got, we called it channel pitch back then. Everybody got 7 minutes on main stage, and we'd have about 6 to 8 vendors, and the MSPs could attend anonymously and give direct feedback. And so it was like a safe place for them to hear about the next vendor. And we always thought that was important. Like, who's the next ID agent? You might not know because you might not hear from them on stage.
Yep.
And that first one we did, we had over 400 people attend, and we were like, we honestly, Terry, we thought we figured it out. Like, we were like, this is it. We did it. It works. And it worked for a long time. But, over the years, that particular element dwindled in terms of, people just weren't attending in 400, you weren't getting 400 people to a webinar and things like that. But the platform slowly evolved. And so what it is today is basically a free resource platform for MSPs to visualize, manage, and evaluate their technology stack. We've now got over 6,300 product reviews from MSPs where they have to put their name on it. So it's really a vendor agnostic platform.
Yeah.
And there's not that many of those that exist for MSPs. So it's basically allowing them to do all the research they'd want to do in an agnostic community and take them along the buyer's journey without actually having to purchase there. We're not a distributor. Now we've built up a platform that's got over 8,000, unique MSP users, over 6,000 unique MSP companies, but it's evolved so much from that early point. And really, I would say the turning point was this free tool called Navistack that we came out with. And Navistack it's just a visualization tool, because every MSP tells me that they manage their vendors through Excel spreadsheets. And so we came out with Navistack, which is, again, it allows you to visualize the technology stack, see your gaps in the stack, identify overlap. And now we've got over 55,000 products that have been added to the various stacks. And that Navistack, which again was never part of the original plan, that started getting us thinking, wow, if they're managing all their vendors here, like, putting it out visually, and everything I keep seeing in forums is all these complaints about contracts with vendors, right? My thing got renewed. I don't like the terms of my contract. You actually are one of the most vocal people about holding people accountable to the contract they signed. And that ended up morphing into what became BetterTracker, which is our first tool that we launched, which allowed MSPs to manage all their vendor contracts and all their SaaS subscriptions. So if you're familiar with like Rocket Money, it's basically Rocket Money for your business. And in its simplest form, the idea was never miss a contract renewal ever again. Take back the power. Don't depend on vendors telling you when their contracts are up for renewal. Because as well as I do, Terry, most vendors don't want you to know when the contract's coming up for renewal, right? They prefer it just keeps getting renewed, as probably does an MSP with their customers. Like it's a natural thing, but it allows you to be empowered of like, okay, I know I have a notification date coming up in 60 days. I've got a custom email that's coming in, is going to tell me regardless of whether the vendor does. And we've tied that into 365 logins with this thing called 365 Scout, where it's basically solving two truths. It's the usage truth for the MSP and their customers, and the subscription truth. And it's uncovering all these revenue opportunities for MSPs. And now I'll shut up for a second.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I just love it. I love the iterative innovation and the net new and here's a need, let's go chase it. I love that. Really interesting, Matt. And I'm not surprised that you're still seeing success. Honestly, it goes back to you. I'll tell you, one of the reasons ID Agent was so successful was the smoke backdrop.
That thing was awesome.
I think that was awesome. There's a lot to it. There's a lot of things to succeed. A lot of different small things that add up to success at the end of the day. It's not, none of us are robots. None of our clients are robots. And even though sometimes we try to treat each other like we're robots, the ones that succeed are the ones that don't. You mentioned contracts. I think that's a really interesting point. I can tell you that we would not have survived COVID without contracts. Our customers would not have thrived with COVID if it weren't for contracts. And And it's really fascinating to me because there is like a super negative connotation with contracts in the channel. And when you push back, they'll literally brag to you that they don't have a contract and that they're month to month with all their customers. And I'm just thinking to myself, are you a business person? Have you thought through this? Like COVID, my guess is a lot of customers that were so proud of their no contracts lost all their customers at the start of COVID, like the first week. Mm-hmm. And then the ones that didn't are the ones that are still in existence today. When they go to sell, a month-to-month contract isn't worth a whole lot versus an annual or whatever. That auto renewal clause really adds up. So it's I think everyone, I have an F-150 right now, and it's got 2 dings on the tailgate. And I would love to go to Ford and just drop my keys on the table, walk out with a new one, but I can't do that. There's a contract that I've signed and I have to fulfill that contract. So, with BetterTracker, I get you're trying to take the power back, and I love that. I think it makes a lot of sense. Are you a fan of no contracts? If you were starting a SaaS company right now for the channel, would you have contracts, or would you have everything be month to month?
Contracts. I did start a SaaS company with BetterTracker, so yeah. You need contracts. Well, I know there's some very vocal, even vendors, like that's their selling point, is that they're month to month, and they're going to earn your business every month.
Yep.
And I get it, but yeah, I think from you do have to look at the future of the company and the value of it as well. So I think to your point, the evaluation is definitely going to hurt if it's month-to-month contract. Certainly if it's no contract, if you're an MSP that's trying to get acquired and you don't have any contracts, your business is significantly less valued. So, it's a debate I'm willing to have probably with any vendor, and it'd be a really interesting conversation to talk about the pros and cons. I don't think, ID Agent, we would have, sold for what we sold without those contracts in place. And, I get the idea of yes, you want to earn somebody's business every month, but things happen, and it's nice to have a year to earn that business as well. And not just trunk it down to two bad weeks. And I'll give you an example of where this killed one of our competitors. Was at that event when we closed 87 deals. We had a very aggressive offer, and those people were at the same event, and basically their people went and canceled. They signed with us, and then were just going to cancel their contract because they didn't have it. It was month to month, so it was really not a contract. And so we signed probably 30 MSPs from a competitor just because of that flexibility. The other piece that's just interesting, one of the reasons BetterTracker evolved in this is because we kept seeing all the vitriol around contracts, and we were like, all right, let's give power to the MSP to at least be aware of when their contracts are up.
Yeah.
But
I create a meeting request in Outlook that recurs every year, notification. A lot of people just don't do that. I think BetterTracker is a brilliant idea. So I'm not surprised. Yeah.
But one of the things that we have noticed from our data set is that despite the pain point of they don't want to sign one-year contracts, 70% of the contracts they sign are one-year contracts in the MSP space. Now, obviously, that's being driven by the the vendors. But I'd remind an MSP who's looking at that is, it's the same reason. There's no hidden reason why the people do this. It's the same reason an MSP wants to sign a 1 or 3 year contract for their customers. It's no different. It's the same reason vendors want it. Yeah. But and it's easy to say this, and not every vendor will do it like this, but it also does help support the vendor in to be able to reinvest in the product. And maybe there's broken promises at higher levels of bigger vendors and stuff, but smaller vendors, that dependency on the recurring revenue is super important.
Oh, yeah.
I don't even know how
to get private equity infusion. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You definitely are way more risk with the month to month. If someone
and frankly, every employee that works there, they're one dirty bomb away from losing their job. Something has nothing to do with them or their business or their product that scares people could result in everyone losing their job. I remember when the first thing of COVID happened, it was like everybody called you at the exact same time. And I'm like, chill, just hold on. And I was right. At the end of the day, it was a boom time for MSPs. Profits went up, revenue went up, but everyone naturally freaked out And it was kind of similar to your big event where a lot of people canceled. It was like a spark of light all of a sudden resulted in, a consequence that it's unfair for the employees and the investors, and at the end of the day, it's rewarded in valuation. I'm not surprised you've been successful. You're a great dude. I love talking to you. I love working with you. You're a wise guy. You've been around. You probably made some mistakes. I'm not going to get into those too much because they're yours to know. But if you could tell Matt Solomon from a decade ago 10 things, let me give me five things that you believe are the reason that you've been successful, that you wish you did more of them. They're the brilliance that you happen to either luck into or you were smart enough to realize up front. What are those lessons learned that you would give the future, the next Matt Solomon, to ensure that they're even more successful than you are?
Oh man, that's a tough question. You did not give me this in advance. This is on the spot. Some of it is just gonna come to my head. One thing I would say is surrounding yourself and being part of an organization that you believe in. The people is massively important. You're spending more time with these people, especially like that ID agent journey. I was on the road all the time, and surrounding myself with people that, that I care about and that were smart. I think that was, that's something I would really look at, like who you're going to be working for the next few years. Listening. Some of it's basic stuff, but it's like really listening to your customers. It's always tough in the MSP space because every MSP has like very individual needs a lot of times. And so you have to really be smart on like what's noise from one individual person versus like, here's like really good advice on how to get your product to the next level. Because I really can say like over the course of these 3 companies, honestly, some of the very best ideas have come from our customers. And I think that's helped us build trust, and I'm able to get on stage and say, look, we listened to exactly what you guys wanted for ID Agent. We listened and we put it into the product, and we're doing the exact same thing with BetterTracker. So come along this journey with us. Yeah, it takes time to build a product over the course of a couple of years, but you trusted us before, trust us again. We're going to do exactly, we're going to take the path and we're going to listen to our customers. I'm probably I've probably advised myself, and I don't think I did it too much, not using the phrase too often of like, that's not my role, especially in a startup. Everybody does everything in a startup. So, being willing to do things that maybe are outside of your role just for the betterment of the company, I think is good. And also you can learn other things. Like, you think about these journeys that these CEOs take on, and I think Chick-fil-A might be an example of that, where they like require you to do every job at some point.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good lesson. I'm a big proponent of also like not asking people to do things you're not willing to do yourself. And there's different levels of it, but like for me, like at events, like, yeah, I guess I'm at the point where I don't have to set up the booth, but I also like to show the team that I'm willing to be in the grind with them. And maybe not everybody has to do that type of stuff, but I think that stuff goes a long way, and I do think people appreciate it. They're like, oh my gosh, like he's here doing this. Like he's a co-founder of the company, and he's getting here at 6:45 a.m. And doing this stuff. And then it makes it easier when I can't make it that one time, and they're understanding. They're like, hey, I've got meetings. Can you do it today? So those are a few of the things that come to my mind off the top of my head.
What about lead gen? What about marketing? What about sales? Anything there?
Lead gen and sales. I guess going back, and it takes us back into the SDR piece a bit, is just have a plan on actually following up. Because again, it pains me, like when I've talked to vendors and they're like, oh my gosh, we did nothing with those 2,000 leads or whatever it is. So I think really having a plan of after show. I think it's so easy. Everybody focuses on, and we have to talk about shows because it's a major part of the industry, but it's what are you doing after the show? And that's probably the biggest conversation that I think if I was advising myself or any other vendor would be around that. I would say, yeah, looking back, we definitely could have strategized better on the post-event stuff. And then, we got involved with you all later, somewhere in the middle of the journey, but it would have been nice earlier in the journey to have that relationship. So I would definitely look at that, because there's just missed opportunities just sitting in a CRM. And then, I guess now I'm just giving advice, general advice, maybe not for myself, but, I'm in this space. I do think you have to be consultative. It's always this like little line of like being a little bit aggressive, but finding the right ways to talk to people, like ask more questions. I guess that would be the lesson I would say. Ask more questions and shut up when they're answering them. That is like the number one thing that and I have to learn this too, because you get excited. Like you're like leading yourself into the sale. You actually have a sale, or you have a demo that's about to be booked. And I tell this to my team. I said, if they're booking the demo, like in front of you on an iPad, shut up. Because like the second you start talking to them while they're typing, you distract them, you might give them a reason to back out of the demo. And same thing with a closed deal. Like you start getting excited, you're like, oh, we're going to do this, this, and this. And then they're like, you triggered something. And then they start questioning it, and then they back out. So I think you just ask more questions and shut up after you ask them and listen.
Awesome. Man, a lot of wise words coming out of that mouth, man. I'm not surprised. You've been around for a long time. You've seen some success. You've probably stubbed your toes a couple times. But, I applaud you, man. It's not easy to do what you do. It's not easy to be on the road. It's not easy to build and maintain relationships with people like Kevin. And then obviously, the opportunity to be a part of something like ID Agent was super special for you. And I hope that BetterTracker does even more and achieves more, so that you can, benefit from the fruits of your labor for generations to come.
Appreciate it, Terry. And thank you for all your support over the years. And definitely tell Andrew I said hello as well.
We'll do it. Thanks so much, Matt. I appreciate you coming aboard.
All right. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.